first time I had a piece of wood kick back at me, it left a bruise the size of the state of Colorado.
Ouch.
Here's the important thing to understand though. I could have avoided it all with proper technique.
Now, kickback, for the uninitiated, is when a workpiece is driven back in the saw, backwards. And when that happens, it can actually projectile back to you, the operator.
Typically that occurs once the piece of wood gets to the back edge of the table saw blade, and either the wood starts to distort and binds, or you lose proper control of it.
Right, so one of our chief goals of this DVD is to teach you some old school techniques so you can use a table saw safely. And a lot of the newer ones have riving knives, and that's a technology that minimizes kickback. So with that in mind, here are some tips. Safety do's, don'ts, and a duh. Do use safety gear. Eye protection, ear protection. A dust mask is a good idea for certain species of wood. No loose sleeves, jewelry, or gloves. This one's a do and a duh. Unplug your machine anytime you're changing a blade or insert.
Do make sure all the parts are aligned before making a cut, namely blade to miter slot and miter slot to fence. And here's a cool trick. Move the miter sled up to the blade and use a playing card as a feeler gauge. You want to feel the same amount of friction at the front and back of the blade. Do the same routine with the fence. Do make sure there's a riving knife or splitter operating properly on the machine. A riving knife shadows the blade's movement without interfering with it. It holds the kerf open to prevent binding and possible kickback. I'm going to reassemble the pawls and put the guard back on and fire it up. That'll give us a look at how the riving knife works.
As the wood is pushed past the back of the saw blade, the riving knife prevents distorting wood from pushing against the blade and binding. It keeps the kerf open throughout the cut. A splitter's function is the same as a riving knife, but the gap between a splitter and blade changes when the blade depth changes. Do use push devices as extensions of your hands. They're designed to keep your hands away from the blade.
Do use roll-off supports or tables when working with long pieces of stock. They help control the stock more effectively. If a board starts to tilt or flex, bad things can happen. So, do everything you can to keep the field level so the workpiece won't bind.
Don't remove the guard. The majority of woodworkers do this because it fills with sawdust and makes it hard to see the workpiece. The guard is just one of 3 safety mechanisms at the blade to protect you. Well, quite a list so far, but I actually thought of one other safety tip. Don't use a dull blade and don't use the wrong type of blade for the work that you're doing.
Very good. And I'll see your list and raise you one.
Go ahead.
When you're setting up to cut your workpiece, make certain that the gullets just clear the stock that you're cutting.
All right, you know, all this just may sound like rah, 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 but everything we're talking about is in the interest of preventing kickback and, of course, digital safety.
You know, accidents happen so fast when they occur that what you want to do is prevent them from ever starting. For example, if you're feeding a board through the saw and it binds up and you can't move forward, hold it in place, turn off the saw.
Yeah, that almost seems counterintuitive, but that's probably the best thing you can do. In fact, if there's anything that makes you feel uncomfortable while you're operating the saw, stop. Take your time. Address the problem. Fix it. You know, in other words, I guess the best safety tool is common sense.